Well, even though it's the second episode, more about Jesse's past is slowly getting revealed, and things just keep getting more interesting and more compelling. Before I get to the episode, real quick, I do know that the intro was from episode 1. I was gonna do, where I do, because of course, the intro corresponds with the cold opening. I'm not gonna do that though, just stick with the one for episode 1. That's the one I have. I don't want to have to change it every week. It's really a pain to do that, so if you guys don't like that, just deal with it. I'm sorry. I don't really think the intros mean that much, but yeah, I mean, if you guys were upset about that, then whatever. Let's get to the review, because you guys don't really care about this. Hey guys, Cameron for Preacher, Season 1, Episode 2C, and yes, we did have to wait a week for this episode, but honestly, I was fine with that. I think the first episode, was supersized, it was 90 minutes long, it gave us, I think, enough to, get out of that first episode. I think it gave us enough time to praise that first episode, and what I liked last week is that people that didn't see that first episode, because maybe they were watching Penny Dreadful or whatever, because of it not being on last week, they replayed the first episode, more people could jump into the show this week, and it'll get more fan base, which hopefully I think it does. I think the shows are being renewed for a second season, but anyways, obviously I was looking forward to this second episode. I love the premiere. I thought it was different. I thought it was weird, and also just a really interesting story. And this episode I thought was just as great, if not better. I mean, there were some really great things in this episode. We find out more about Jesse, what his background is, who he really is and everything. We're finding more about the guys after him, but let's just get into this episode. There's a lot to get into, and first of all, the beginning of this episode was really different, and I'm hoping that Preacher does this, where every episode they start in something that, you don't expect them to do. I mean, obviously, cold openings, that's nothing new, but this show seems to do it in a really cool way. We start with a little girl waking, seeing a man in her room, and this seems to be back in time. You can tell right away, this is definitely not the present. They're wearing, like, Western-type clothes, and a woman comes in, puts a cold cloth on her head, sings her a German lullaby, reminded me of Goodnight Mommy, because if you remember the trailer of Goodnight Mommy, they had a German version of a lullaby in that, so it kind of reminded me of that. But she tells the man that he has to go. She tells him it will take a few days to get the medicine the girl needs. She says to come back to us, and we see it is 1881, actually. Now, I did hear that this isn't really important now, but as the show's going to go on, it eventually is going to become very important, because I'm kind of like, why are we seeing this exactly? But we then see a man ride into the scrub of a vast prairie. A boy from a small wagon train calls to him and offers him food. The dogs won't stop barking, much like the wolves from the night before when the man stopped. The boy's father yammers on and on. The boy's father, he's going on and on saying that they're saying nothing. And the father comments that this is paradise, but the man says it's not. And he rides on the next day past a tree of hanging corpses with the scalps peeled off, and it's really crazy. I mean, just the way that started. We don't really know what this means. I know it means something. I don't know what it means yet, but it's really interesting overall. We see a hand-painted ratty sign says, "Welcome to the town of Ratwater," and that makes me think that Ratwater is still around. We are going to eventually get to Ratwater. I'm sure there's more going on here than we think, that it connects to the show somehow. I don't know yet, but eventually it is going to mean something. I don't know what it means yet, but I can't wait to see how things started. I loved how different it was. It really did show how weird the show really is, and how it really isn't afraid to go into some really strange territory. I definitely really did appreciate that. And that was a perfect way to start the episode. So then we get to the actual start of the episode. We see Jesse is baptizing a small congregation one by one. Eugene is one of the people that's excited about his sins being washed away, which I like seeing Eugene more in this episode. Definitely seems like we're going to see a lot of Eugene, and we see, one of them is Eugene, and there's like this other girl, and they're all basically pledging their allegiance to God and like taking all their sins away. And you can definitely tell, like I said, Jesse is trying to be a good preacher. That's what he wants to do. He wants to be as good as a preacher as possible, and he's going to continue trying to do that. We then see the two strangers, Fior and DeBlanc. They watch from a ways away through binoculars, and we get a lot more with these two, because before we had that one scene in the beginning, at the end of the first episode, we find a lot more of what's going on here. One comments that it doesn't make sense, and we don't really know what they're investigating. We know they're tracking down these preachers, obviously. We don't really know what's going on, though. Tulip then shows up, asks to be baptized. She whispers that it's time to get to work and thanks him for getting her all wet, and Jesse says no, and I love the interplay between Jesse and Tulip. I mean, there's so much great banter here, and also Tulip, what she's trying to do, you totally understand what she's trying to do in this episode. I really did love her here, and basically, Emily asks Jesse who the woman was, and he plays dumb, like he doesn't know her, and You can tell that Emily obviously knows. Miles talks to Jesse and annoys her as she's trying to use the cappuccino machine. Cassidy asks Emily for a pay advance, and she reminds him that the AC is still broken. He says he's waiting on a part. He tells her he's desperate for drug money and might do something bad because he desperately needs his drugs. And again, I love Cassidy in this episode. I thought he had some really funny lines, especially this one scene with Jesse, which I'll get into. Some whisper about Ted cutting out his heart in front of his mom. Apparently, Ted is dead. We basically get that impression here. And Emily tells Jesse that Cassidy drank almost a case of communion wine, and Cassidy bumps into Eugene, which honestly, even though we've only known Cassidy for 2 episodes, that is totally something that Cassidy would do. I mean, the fact that he drank someone's blood out of a cup, I mean, he definitely would do this. He'd drink the communion wine, and he bumps into Eugene. Love the way that was done. Later, Cassidy asks Jesse why the kid had a face like an asshole, because obviously his name is Arseface, and he says he tried to shoot himself with a gun and survive. Cassidy says he should have tried harder, and I love that. I mean, Cassidy he does not hold back. He's such a savage, but that's one of the reasons I love Cassidy. Jesse tells Cassidy he can't make trouble if he hands around. Cassidy agrees. Some guys call murderer after Eugene is dad, and he has to talk his dad down from confronting him and everything. So it's interesting because obviously when you look at Eugene, he kind of does look like a monster. The fact that his face, looks like an ass and everything, but it's kind of like Frankenstein, the way that Frankenstein was looked at as this monster, but he's really not. And it kind of makes Eugene a lot more interesting of a character. Even though he's ridiculed and it's kind of funny, you do feel bad for him because he really is just a regular guy who, tried to kill himself and probably still has those thoughts, but it didn't work out for him, and he's given a chance to live. But I think Eugene kind of doesn't really want to live. You can definitely, I think, can tell that living is not the best choice. He is still getting picked on. He's still being bullied, and he's still very upset about it. So basically, I think that's very interesting what's going on with that. So Linus tells Jesse that he had an urge about a little girl who rides the bus he drives. The guy babbles on, and Jesse tunes out, and he hears a ringing in his ears, and we don't really know what's going on here, but we start to realize really more what's going on with Jesse, because, of course, we heard in the first episode that Jesse used to do a lot of damage, and that he used to fight a lot of people and hurt some people and things like that, but we start to realize more of really what he's capable of in this episode. Jesse comes back to himself, tells him that he can't act on his urges and must truly repent, and Jesse then says that Linus has to stop sinning. He gives the guy a hug. He says, "Thank you, preacher," then says he won't be the same after today. So Jesse then sits aside smoking. A dog barks nonstop. He's annoyed and shouts quiet, and it does abruptly. The way he was able to do that, like I said, Jesse has this power, I guess, where, if he told you to do anything, you could do it. So I think that's really interesting. Donnie, whose arm is in a cast, is with some other men, and they come to visit a farm. Of course, remember that awesome scene with Donnie in the first episode. So Donnie's back here. They come to visit a farm. They talk about them taking part of their land. The couple is intimidated, and they sign the paper. The team immediately begins to move their furniture out of the house. A bulldozer knocks the house down. Really crazy. Donnie busts the noise of the guy driving the van he's in. The other man looks away. Jesse and Emily are then in front of the grocery store, and he's soliciting such suggestions on how to make the church better, because obviously the church, no one really takes it seriously. We know, of course, the stuff that people said about the church. We know how people feel about the church, and it's just not really that great. He wants to make it better, and I like that Jesse really is making this effort, even though it doesn't really seem to be working. I like that he is trying to make this effort, and it's obviously because this is what his father wanted him to do, so there's that as well. A school bus then drives by. Jesse stares as it passes, and he gets into his truck. He sees his steering wheel is completely gone. Now, what happened, we don't know, but Tula pulls up, asks if Jesse took his wheel, and asks if Jesus took his wheel, which I thought that was a hilarious line, because the song Jesus Took the Wheel. She says the baptism worked wonders, and she's changed, then drives off, leaving him stranded, and the fact that she just drove off and left him there, I mean, really funny stuff. Jesse sees that she hung it up over a nearby light pole, and that she, in fact, is the one that took the wheel. So later, he drives back to the church. Cassidy hides in the shadows of the church porch so the sun can't get to him, and wiggles a bottle of hooch at Jesse, who comes to drink with him. And Cassidy mocks Jesse for thinking that God has a plan for him, then says that it's a boring plan. And again, like I said, we know that Cassidy really doesn't believe in God. He doesn't really have that faith. And while they're playing it as something fun, because I think Cassidy's just a fun character right now, I do think eventually it is going to become a big issue. The fact that Cassidy doesn't really have any faith, he doesn't, even if you don't believe in God, you should believe in something. You have to. You got to believe in something. You got to have that drive, because if you don't, it's just not going to work out as well for you. You got to believe in something, and clear that Cassidy does, and Cassidy is the definition of an atheist, and Basically, he says it's a boring plan. It's God's plan to tell him that it's dull. Cassidy reminds him that he broke a guy's arm to make him make a bunny sound, which is really interesting that we found this out, that Jesse did this. And we remember that from what he did to Donnie, obviously. So Jesse snaps, calls him a loser because he doesn't want to be reminded, I guess, of what he did. Cassidy asks who taught him to fight, and then Jesse asks about himself. He says he's a 119-year-old vampire from Dublin who has never seen the Pacific Ocean and thinks the Big Lebowski is overrated. And they actually get into a legit fight about this. Jesse grabs his flask. Cassidy wants him, but he drinks anyway. Jesse says he liked the Big Lebowski, then passes out cold. Cassidy says it was a shite film, and I love the way that scene was done. Really funny stuff. I like the interplay between these two, and even though, like I said, right now they're treating it as something fun, I do think it's not going to be as fun as the show goes on. So a maid then comes to the door. Fior answers gun in hand, scares her off, and that was really weird the way he just scared her off like that, obviously because he had a gun in his hand. So they take a large trunk out with them and leave the motel, and again, we don't really know what's going on there. Cassidy is out for a joyride in Jesse's truck. He took his keys and wallet, which is crazy. Just the fact that Jesse was passed out, took his keys. And there's some, now we know obviously why he did this. I think he did this probably to get his alcohol. There's something terrifying inside Jesse as he sleeps, though. Fior and LeBlanc are at the church staring at him, still unconscious. They open the trunk and we see a machine inside. They see a coffee can on him, and then they crank the machine and a song begins to play, and we get this hilarious scene of LeBlanc singing about winking, blinking, and nod, which I used to read that book all the time. So this not only was creepy, it was also kind of funny the way this was done. The music's playing, he sings about fishing for a fish, and Jesse snores on. He checks the coffee can. That's something I love, is while this scene was creepy, it was also funny. Like, they always find the funny in making it creepy. And he sees it's empty, then says it doesn't make sense. Fior says on to plan B, pulls out a chainsaw, and then just starts to crank it, and Cassidy shows up, tells him to get away from Jesse, and even though he just took Jesse's truck, he's still very protective over him. He says he knows they're looking for him and are going to be sorry they found him. LeBlanc shoots him. Fior goes back to cranking the chainsaw. LeBlanc goes to finish him off, but the vampire attacks. They grapple. Fior comes to help. Cassidy fights him off. Now, we know obviously how powerful Cassidy is. We know that he can take them out, and he beats LeBlanc in the face with a Bible. Fior comes in with a chainsaw. Cassidy wrestles him off for it. There are going to be a lot of people who are deeply religious that probably are going to bash this show because he hurt him with a Bible, but I don't really care because I think the show's really ballsy to do that. Fior comes in with a chainsaw. Cassidy wrestles him off for it, then puts it into his shoulder, cuts Fior's arm off, literally cuts his arm off, and the chainsaw is dropped, keeps moving towards Jesse, dragging the dismembered arm behind it, and it's headed for Jesse, and Cassidy slips in blood, trying to get to him, and stops it just before it hacks into Jesse, who is still sleeping, and such a close one. I mean, if anything, that could have just gone right on Jesse. Obviously, we're not going to kill Jesse because he's our main character, but such a well-done scene. I love the way that was done, and this show just knows how to do violence so well. Knows how to do combat violence. It was a very terrifying scene. Anything could have happened. It was also kind of funny as well, the way that Cassie was able to take them out. I love the way that was done, and also because the fact that Cassie was just blaming Jesse for, you know, hurting a man's arm. I mean, Cassie just took off a man's arm, so they're really, I mean, he's kind of a hypocrite for doing that, but I think he knows that. So at a local whorehouse, we see the men partying that evicted the family earlier. Some are playing poker, and a young boy walks around. Tulip is there playing poker with them, and Clive, the guy with the busted nose, isn't happy that she beat them again. Clive stomps out, tells Lacey to keep on. Mosey, the madam, tells him to go easy on her, but he seems menacing. Mosey asks Tulip about her uncle, and she talks about how drunk he always is, and then she takes a call from Danny and sets him meet, and Tulip asks if she can borrow a room, and then they sit to play poker game, and I'm thinking we're going to find out more about Tulip's, you know, uncle eventually. We hear a little bit here, but I feel like this is eventually going to come into play, and it is going to play a big role. Not yet, but I feel like as the show goes on, it's going to be a big role. It's going to play a big role, I mean. So Cassie's eating up the blood on the floor. Really disgusting stuff, but basically the shotgun hole is in his stomach, finally closer up. He curses at the mess. He cranks up the chainsaw, quotes Scarface saying, "Say hello to my little friend." Totally something that Cassidy would do. I love it. He chops up the bodies, cleans up, but by then the sun is up, so we can't get rid of all the signs of violence. I gotta say, as awesome as Cassidy is, though, Tulip is just as awesome, and I can't really figure out which one of them I like more, because they both have things I love about them, and they're both so different, but they're both so much the same, and I can't wait till those two have a scene together, because still, they don't have a scene together in this episode, unfortunately, which sucked, because I wanted them to. They didn't, but you did get a lot of stuff with Cassidy, and you did get equal amount of stuff with Tulip, which I definitely really did enjoy. So I want them to see together. They didn't. I hope they do soon. They just haven't yet. So finally, Emily kicks Jesse awake after he's been asleep for I don't know how long on the sanctuary floor. She asks what's up. She says it smells like something died in here. She hands him a casserole to take on his errand with him. He asks where he's going, and a woman rubs moisturizer on her daughter's face. Her daughter is in a coma, and Jesse says he's sorry. Tells her mom, Terry Loach, about his experience with grief. She says those are nice words, but they won't help her wake up, and says they won't change her diaper. She pulls the wig off her daughter's head, and we see part of her head is missing. So right away we see how that translates into what we saw in the beginning with the skinheads. That's kind of what's going on there. Not fully, but kind of is. That's kind of how I saw it, is what's going on there. And for a second when I did see the daughter, I'm like, is that the same daughter that we saw in the beginning? I'm like, no, that's not possible. It was from like the 1800s. So obviously something is going on with the daughter. We don't know what's going on, and we don't know how her head is missing, and we don't know why she needs diapers either, but she does. Jesse then watches the school drive by as he leaves the house after the mom chews him out. Later, Jesse is driving after dark, stops his truck, he gets out and calls hello. Someone creeps on him with a taser. He wakes later to see he's been chained up in a room, and a woman in a mask comes in to scare him, but of course he knows it's Tulip, because Tulip would totally do this sort of thing, would totally torture him just to talk to him, and says, get me out of here. She says the door is open, but he says his ankle is chained. Tulip tells him the map she has is for a client of Danny's, and when they swap it, they will get interesting information. And again, what a savage. I mean, she literally chained him up just to get information out of him, and he says he doesn't care, but she says she's going to Houston to meet Danny. She says she knows what he did to Donnie, and says that's the real him. And honestly, I don't think she's wrong. That's really who he is. The fact that he, mercilessly abuses people, he mercilessly hurts them, that is who Jesse is, and Jesse can't deny that that is who he is. He clearly is trying to, but he can't do that anymore. And Tulip straddles him, says she's going to ask him to do the job. He'll say no, but she won't do it without him, even though he's going to say no. She's not going to do this without him. She's going to make sure that he continues to do this with her, because this is something that she wants to do with him. He always promised that they continue to do this, and he hasn't, and she wants to do this with him. So Tulip says she'll just keep asking because deep down he's a bad, bad man, and she knows that. She knows that really this is not who he really is. He doesn't really want to be a preacher. He's just covering that up because he doesn't really want to admit who he really is. And she says the bad man will come out eventually and say yes, and he'll eventually, those dark the dark being in him will eventually come out, and that is actually who he is. So I think it's a very interesting scene. Tulip tells him to think it over. He asks her for the key. She kicks the chain over. He sees it wasn't fastened in the wall, and she walks out. So literally, he could have just gotten the key, gotten the chain that way, and the chain was right there all along. So I think that's very interesting. But Tulip really does bring up some good points here. The fact that he does have this darkness in him. Is he really going to control it, or is he going to embrace it? It is kind of like Penny Dreadful, but Penny Dreadful, he's a werewolf, and there's that whole situation. The difference here is that Jesse, we don't really know what he is. We don't really know what he is right now. We don't know really what he can do. I think it's very interesting. I like the mysteriousness here, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where that goes in the coming weeks. So Jesse then tries to saw the chain off his ankle later while he's drinking. He hears someone coming, and it's Eugene who asks to put the chain on him. He says he did it to himself. He's lying. Jesse asks Eugene what he wants, and Eugene says he lied about him being changed after his baptism, and he says he felt better at first, then felt bad again later. He says maybe he didn't do it right, then asks if they can try it again. Jesse tells him keep trying. It's all they can do. He says a change in the soul comes from God, and Eugene asks what if this is the me that God wants, and that's why he's always the same. And we know that Eugene feels that God really isn't on his side, and that God isn't really with him because God made him this way, and he feels that this is who God really wants him to be. And honestly, like I said, I really do feel bad for Eugene. As much as they're making fun of him, it's sad, really. I mean, he has this horrible deformity. He's alive. He doesn't understand why he's still here. He doesn't understand why God didn't just let him die. He's trying to find his purpose, and he doesn't really know why he's still on this earth. And it's a very sad situation. I definitely do feel bad for him. And Jesse says he gets what he's saying and looks lost in thoughts, and you can tell that Jesse doesn't really know what to do because he knows that he really doesn't. I feel like he himself is questioning God as well. Who does God really think he is? Does God really want him on this earth either? Does he really deserve to be here still? It's a very interesting situation the way that that's going on. So later Jesse goes to Lionel's house. The bus is parked out front. Jesse breaks the glass in the door, lets himself in. He listens at one bedroom door, then goes deeper into the house. He hears a man coughing. He finds Lionel in the bathroom flossing. He punches him in the face hard and says, forget her. Lionel says who, and Jesse says, you know who. Jesse starts throwing water in the bathroom, takes his jacket off and hangs it up. Lionel says he just can't come into his house like this and says he's sick and addicted and the desire doesn't go away. Steaming water fills the tub. Linus looks scared, then says he'll forget about it. He tells Jesse he can't do this. He says everything he said to him at church is confidential, and those are the rules. He says he cleansed his sins, and that's what's going on. That basically they were in, when you confess to a preacher, that's you confessing to a preacher. A preacher shouldn't do anything about this. And Jesse clearly, like this again shows how he's not a good preacher because he's beating him up. And Jesse turns the water off. Linus says he's repenting. Jesse says they're going to do it right this time. Slams his face into the very hot water. Says forget her. Linus screams. Then says he can't. Jesse uses weird possessed voice. Says forget her. Linus asks what's going on. Jesse says he told him to forget her. He says who? Linus screams what'd you do to my brain? As Jesse grabs his coat, walks out, and we don't know what he was able to do, but somehow Linus, I guess, was able to forget her or something. I'm not really sure. Very interesting scene. I don't fully understand it, but I like that. I feel like you're not really supposed to understand because, again, it's very mysterious as to what's actually going on. And I think Jesse doesn't fully understand what's going on with him either, which is very interesting. So Cassidy's digging in the dirt, later burying bodies. Sheriff Root talks to Fior and DeBlanc, who are very much alive, and we see he is not digging their bodies. No, obviously they're not alive. They're main villains in the show. They're not just going to die. But whose bodies are he burying? That's what I'm wondering, because obviously it's not them, so who else did he kill? We don't really know. But Sheriff Rude then talks to Fior and DeBlanc, who are very much alive. He asks who they are, tell them that they're from the government, and that cannot end well at all, because obviously we know the sheriff really doesn't trust Jesse, but he is tight with Jesse, and I feel like they're going to try to turn him against Jesse, and this can't end well at all. We're going to see what happens there. They're obviously not from the government, but that's going to be very interesting. Jesse then comes back to the Loach house, asks if he can pray with Tracy. Her mom, Terry, lets him in, goes to make coffee. He speaks to the girl, then sits closer. He says he'd like to try something. Jesse uses his possessed voice, says, open your eyes, and that is how the episode ends. Really chilling stuff, but let's get more in this episode, because obviously there's a lot more to talk about. So overall, guys, another fantastic episode. I really did love this one overall, but there really is a lot to get into. First of all, what is this darkness inside Jesse? I feel like he fully doesn't comprehend it either. He doesn't really know what's going on with him. We don't really know much about his past either. We know that he had a father. We know that obviously he once was a very bad man. Tulip wants him to embrace it. What is Jesse? What really is going on with him? How does he have this darkness inside him? We don't really know. What did he do to Linus? What did he do to, all the people that he said things to? What happened there? We don't really know what's going on there. Very interesting overall. I can't wait to see the way that all turns out. And does Jesse really like what he's becoming? I can't really tell. I feel like part of him, I feel like he's kind of scared. Like, he, deep down, I think, likes what he's becoming. But at the same time, I think he's kind of thinking, is this messed up? Because it kind of is messed up what he's doing. I mean, really, what he's doing is very fucked up. And there's really no other way to translate it. It is kind of fucked up. It's really weird, and he doesn't fully understand. I think that, honestly, is very interesting what's going on there. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And also, what did he do to Linus? I'm sure we'll find out, but I don't really understand what he did to Linus yet. I'm sure we're going to find out in the next week. Now, as far as DeBlanc and Fior go, they're clearly going to try to turn Root against Jesse. Obviously, they're going to try to bad name Jesse. They're going to try to make sure that he does not trust Jesse even more. That Jesse's this terrible person. We still don't fully know what they're doing. We know they're going after preachers, but we don't know what else is going on besides that. Who else did Cassidy kill? Obviously, he's burying bodies. We don't really know what's going on there. I cannot wait for him and Tulip to have that first scene together. I'm looking forward to the day they do. I know they're going to at some point. They just haven't yet. As far as Tulip goes, like I said, I think her points are valid. The fact that she's saying embrace the beast within you, this is really who you are. You can't deny that you are this savage being. And honestly, throughout this episode, we definitely do see that. Jesse clearly does have darkness inside him. Now, does he want to control it or not control it? That's up to him. But clearly, he does have something inside him, and he needs to embrace that rather than conceal it. And really, that's a question of, does he want to do that? What does he really want to do? A very interesting situation. Can't wait to see the way that turns out. Eugene. Is God really on Eugene's side? Because clearly Eugene does not feel he is on his side. I don't really know what's going to happen there. Is Eugene going to be able to get God on his side? I mean, I don't think you can just randomly get God on your side, but I think Eugene's going to try to do that. I think he wants God to be on his side. I think he wants God to be there for him. He wants to know why God made him this way, obviously, so I think that's very interesting as well. And I do feel bad for him. As much as Cassidy makes fun of him, I do feel bad for Eugene. As far as Cassie goes, I do think being an atheist is eventually going to become a problem for Cassie, because he has to believe in something. He has to have some sort of faith, and how is he going to react to Fior and DeBlanc not being dead? These are probably the first two men he thinks he's killed and hasn't, and that's going to be a very interesting situation to see what happens with that. The fact that they aren't killed, how he's going to react to that. I can't wait to see what happens with that. It's probably going to be very funny, but also kind of, shocking for him, because he's never really dealt with something like that before. So that, I think, is really interesting. Jesse, trying to be a good preacher. Clearly, he's trying to do that. Emily wants to be a good preacher as well. She's trying to help him out with that. But I like the way that he's kind of torn between two women. It's a love triangle, but it's really not a love triangle because he's not attracted to either of these women. It's more of the love of, either the love of the church or the love of darkness. It's those two things are colliding together. And I know that's kind of a weird analogy, but that really is what it is. It's either, you're either, for the church or you're for the darkness. Why are you really here? Because Jesse said in the first episode, this is why I come home. But is that really why I came home? We don't really know. That's very interesting. And then the first scene that we saw, what is that really trying to show? Are we going to go to the town of Ratwater? We can find out what's really going on there. Why did we see that scene? I mean, we don't really know what the point of that was. I'm looking forward to seeing really what that was about because I think overall that's really interesting. I'm sure we saw that for a big reason. I just don't really know what that reason is yet, and I like that. I like that we don't really know why we saw all of this. What is the point of all that? What's really going on there? All that is stuff that I want to know, and I don't really know why that's happening. Jesse's voice as well. How can he get people to just, how can he control them? Because clearly he controlled Linus. He did something to his brain. We don't really know what he did, but I think that's very interesting. Also, Tulip's uncle, are we going to find out more about him? I mean, we heard that little tidbit about him here, but I think we are going to find out more about him. It just seems like something that we are going to find out more about. It can't just be something they abandoned. I feel like we have to find out more about her uncle at some point. I don't know when we're going to find out more, but I definitely think we're going to. So yeah, I think that definitely is going to happen. But overall, guys, I'm really enjoying the show. I think it's really entertaining. It's dark, but it's also really funny. And I think they do a good job of combining the darkness and funny. A lot of shows don't know how to do that. But this show, I think, just hits it right perfectly. You got Cassidy, who's hilarious, but he's also, a badass. And then you got Tulip as well. Like I said, I can't wait to see those two have a scene together. I'm still waiting for it. I know I keep saying that, but those two by far are the most entertaining characters on the show. Between Cassidy's quips and then Tulip, torturing Jesse into channeling his darkness. I can't wait to see where all this goes. I can't wait for the next 8 episodes of the show. I'm loving the show so far. AMC, like I said, definitely has a hit on their hands. Like I said, I think this was just as strong as the first episode. Even though, like I said, just like the first episode, I don't fully understand what's going on. I feel like that's the point, and I like that. Not everything you need to understand what's going on to like it. There are a lot of things I don't understand. Like, look at The Leftovers Season 2. Half of the stuff in the first episode makes no sense, but then as the season goes on, it's, makes tons of sense. And I feel like Preacher is going to be one of those shows where they show you some things, and you're not really sure what they mean, but then as the season goes on, it's like, oh, yeah. Then remember that. There's going to be a lot of callbacks to episodes like this one. I definitely think that's going to happen as the season goes on, especially the first scene. I feel like there's going to be a lot of callbacks to that as it goes on. Also, the cold openings. Are they going to do more cold openings like that? I hope they do. I like the way they've done the cold openings so far. They're one of the most entertaining parts of the show because you never really know where they're going to go. But overall, guys, so much you guys saw this episode. What do you think of the show overall? Are you enjoying the show? And I will see you guys in my next show, which will be for tonight's episode of Penny Dreadful, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.